Hi, everybody. I'm Sharon Waxman. I'm the editor-in-chief of TheWrap, coming to you from our virtual studio at the Sundance Film Festival this year. I am very excited to welcome the talent behind a film that's playing in competition. It's called Alice. Let's welcome to the studio the director and the writer of this film, Krystin Ver Linden, producer Peter Lawson, and the star of this film, who is Alice, Keke Palmer. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So glad to have you. So this film is going to make a lot of noise. I am going to make a prediction right here and now. It's for our viewers who haven't seen it yet, and almost nobody has. It's a story that seems to start out on a plantation in Georgia where Keke plays a slave called Alice. And that's a story that we have seen in other films of the misery of the life on a plantation. But then she escapes and discovers actually that she's in 1973. And the film then takes a very unusual and unexpected turn. And I'm not going to give that part away. But Krystin, where the hell did this idea come from? Let's just start right there.
Inspired by true events. So my mom, being a screenwriter for a decade, like any proud parent, they try to give you ideas or send you random stories. And she sent me a bunch of articles and she said, this would be a great movie. And I read them and it stuck with me. It made me cry. It made me proud. It made me not want to go to sleep knowing that I wasn't going to do it. So I literally read it on a Saturday and by Monday I was writing it.
Well, what is the true kind of fabric that this is based on?
So for example, one of the stories we start on the journalist brought the woman back to the property and she doesn't tell us what's going on. She's saying, how do you feel? And the woman's describing how she feels as she goes back onto, and then she starts to say plantation. So as a reader, you're going, what is she talking about? And then as it gets further and further along, we find out, oh my God, this woman was born on this plantation. She grew up, she had a violent childhood. The owners of the plantation were like Quakers, and they kept up a tradition for over 100 years. And through a series of events, she managed to run away. And the only difference with all of these stories, they all took place in the 60s when they managed to get away. It was always the 1960s. The reason I chose 1973 and the 70s was so that our character could have the reflection of seeing the civil rights. And there was a beat before instead of going right out into the middle of the civil rights movement.
Okay, I'm still processing what I didn't realize when I saw it, which is that this is not science fiction. It's not magical realism. It's actually based on something that happened. So Keke, had you heard, I'm going to guess that you hadn't heard of this when.
No, I didn't know that happened. But once I did find out about it, it unfortunately made sense in my mind. I could see how that could have happened for sure. Mm-hmm. I think there's so much stuff that we don't realize in that era, in that time, that I think is pointed out in the film that'll be, disheartening, but also informative, because I think the idea is a lot of times, Abraham said you're free and everybody agreed and hey, but it's like, that's actually not true. There are a lot of people that went against it. There were a lot of different states that were late to picking up on it.
Well, Texas we know about, of course.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people that didn't listen to the law and decided to do what they wanted to do. So
after the war.
Yeah, unfortunately, as we dug deeper, Sharon, there were just so many of these stories that kind of mirrored each other, into almost the late 60s. It was unbelievable.
It's quite mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. Because as you did, is that it was actual slavery. It wasn't like sharecropping, which was another step down from that, though still quite enslaving in many ways. But this is,
and that's what I love that the movie shows, because a lot of times I think, because we see it from being in the future or being in the present day, we're able to understand, oh, that's slavery, this is that. But when you really look at it from the point of view of, the woman that was, that Krystin got the idea from in the interview, or when you look at it from the point of view of Alice as portrayed in the film, that's their life. The concept and the ideology of slave, that's something that we know. That's not something that they were just like, oh, I'm a slave. And that's not the way that they existed. That's not the way that it was able to continue. It was like, oh, you're with me and you're born into it and you're less than, and this is just the way that it is. So I think really breaking that open is also important, because a lot of times we see the slave story from the point of view of everybody knowing they're a slave. And that's not the reality.
How was it for, I have to ask that you were both incredibly empowered, smart women. Keke, when you get to the part of your character where you are like a superhero almost, and going back and insisting that you are going to punish the people who did this and release the rest of your family and other people who were still enslaved on this property. What does it feel like to put that persona on? And I ask that of each of you as women and as women of color.
You want to go first, Krystin?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, growing up, I grew up in Northern California in a tiny, tiny town that was all Caucasian. My mom was the first African-American woman that was in this town. And growing up as a biracial kid and everyone wanted to touch your hair, you just feel like an outsider. And you don't have heroes in real life other than your mother and your grandmother and your aunts and all that. So growing up, it was important to have people like Diana Ross or Pam Grier to look at and say, oh man, I can like really feel, I can stand up for what I believe in, and I can have a voice and have a say. And if they can do it, I can do it too. And I really, in the process of writing about the stories that I read, I knew I was writing someone that I wish I had growing up. And so that meant a lot to me, because
as an example, or as a reference.
Wait, say that again?
That you wish you had.
I wish I had an Alice as a little girl, feeling like feeling bad for being different, or feeling bad because I don't look like everybody else, And Alice, what I love about her too is she doesn't hold back on how she feels, because coming into this new world, it's all new to her. So it's she's really embracing the idea of defining herself on her own terms, not the labels placed on her from the time she was born. And I love that so much.
Yeah, it's almost like watching an entire rebirth happen in the space of 24 to 48 hours, So Keke, could you address the same question, sort of how it feels to put on that a certain cloak and mentality?
It felt weighted in a lot of ways, because obviously a lot of the themes and the experiences that Alice went through were extremely traumatic and triggering in a lot of ways. But it also did, to your point, make me feel, in a sense, my own version of a superhero, and how I actually view my ancestors. Because again, a lot of times when we approach this conversation, it's from the conversation is often started, sometimes even written by the oppressor. So it's told in a very like, I feel bad for you kind of way. And that's just not the approach that Krystin took from it, because that's not how she views it. And that's not how I view it. So it was done from a place of, yes, this happened, but I'm strong. I will survive, and you won't take my spirit. And so that aspect of it, I felt just very empowered. And I felt that this is a narrative that I want to be a part of. This is the person that represents my mother. This is the person that represents my ancestors. A lot of the stories that you hear sometimes, it's very unfamiliar, because that's not even really the culture of Black people in general. It's like, we'll be going through hell and we're making jokes. So it's like, there's so much levity. There's so much spirit that is often left out of the conversation that I think is tapped in when we talk about Alice.
Yeah. So how did you, so was the first part of creating this character more difficult than the second part? I have to imagine it would have been, but I don't know.
The running, I don't mean to say the running joke, but essentially, loosely, the running joke was, I can't wait to get to the 70s. I mean, we were saying that. We all was saying that on set. Like, it was like, and the way that Peter and them all decided to make, how the filming was going to be scheduled was, we filmed all the plantation stuff first, and then once we got into the 70s, baby, we wasn't going back. We were just thrilled. You know what I mean? So it was really,
there was a weight lifted for sure.
It was so heavy for all of us. You know what I mean? We would be doing these crazy scenes, and once we got it, we're like happy and cheering and up in arms, and we're moving on. But when we got to the 70s, honestly, we were all so happy every time. Just like, yes, 70s, bell bottoms and froze, anything, to get us off of that plantation, girl.
That's great. I have to believe that. Also, I thought Common, who we love so much and we know well here at The Wrap, did such a great job with his character. He's so much fun to listen to, and watching him dance to Stevie Wonder also. Really fantastic moment. Just hang on to that one, like put that in a little box. How did you come to cast Common, Krystin?
Well, it was the logic, and I think Peter said earlier, we all asked ourselves, especially when I was writing it, if I were Alice coming into a world I didn't know, who would I feel safe enough to get into a truck with? And it would be Common, but also just to backtrack further, as a little girl in my hometown, Common was a big hero of mine. And I had all of his albums, and I can rap to all of his songs. So it was a dream to work with him because of what he represented from the time I was a little girl anyway, and the message that he had in his songs. So it just felt like it came full circle.
I bet he really loved playing this role. I bet you guys had a lot of fun. And the soundtrack is fantastic also. It's really, I love that it takes this turn. Last thing before I go, is there anyone, if you know, who remains from this family of people who were on this plantation?
Not that I know of.
Keke, what were you going to say?
I was just thinking that was a great question that you had asked, because I actually thought that myself. I never actually asked Krystin, but I guess just in terms of time, and you would imagine that they all would be probably passed on or deceased, or
there may be some like further on descendants, but majority of these folks are no longer with us.
Yeah.
And
well,
go ahead. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
The woman that one of the first ones I read, she chose not to have children. She wanted to dedicate the rest of her life to herself, which I loved so much. So
yeah.
Oh,
good for her. That is so powerful.
Well, I'm glad for the reason, because I was afraid that it might be because she didn't want to pass the legacy of
No, she went to college and she became an engineer, and she was amazing.
Oh, we got to. Can you make that documentary or something? Because I would really like
to. Alice. She wants Alice too, and
I do.
Enjoying her life.
Alice could actually be like an entire superhero. I think you could just like depart from the reality, and I would watch Keke like with that fro and some like double pistols, like going kicking ass. I would watch her do anything. Yeah. Like I would totally do.
No, that was when Keke had the fro and she first came on set. It was like her superwoman moment.
Yeah,
the whole place went nuts.
Totally.
I even started walking different. Remember that, Krystin?
Oh yeah, it was a strut.
I love it. Doesn't that tell you everything? Amazing. Okay, so now you need to go make a sequel and a documentary, but first enjoy the moment. And congratulations, and thank you for coming to our studio.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sharon.